Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad you can join us here. This is Ready Set Data. We have our software engineer, O'Grady. We have Lee Markham, our premier database administrator. Me,
Premiere,
Anthony, premier. He's out there on the interwebs.
right?
People go to his talks. So he's primo vera. Does that actually mean something? Database administrator,
Primavera. It's a
DBA.
pasta.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm hungry. I'm Anthony Fortner, derailed as usual. I'm
Three
a data
seconds.
engineer.
It's like a record.
Yes,
Really good.
I'm getting good at it. I'm getting good at it. On top of that, I forgot to mute our conversation, so I have an echo. 1 second. That should be gone now. So yeah, today we're talking about source control. Um, do either of you guys, before we kick it off, before I start rambling, either of you guys use source control in your daily job right now?
I think you would know that I do currently. I would love to meet some developers who don't use source control so that I can hit them.
I
Yeah,
don't
we
think I
use
want to meet them.
we use Git Azure. Um, the main tool that we use is called Fork. I don't know if you've ever used it.
No.
It's really cool, and I can post a little snippet about it in the Discord, which everybody should be checking out if you are not already. But it's a you've used Anthony. I know you have at least used source control in Visual Studios, where you have the kind of pathing and branches, and you can kind of
You have a GUI to
check
help you
stuff
out. Yeah.
in. Yeah. So Fork is a separate application that does pretty much the same thing, but it's a lot more powerful. So you can do rebases, and you can do fast forwards and merges and automated rebase. There's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so I have a lot to say about this tonight. I'm sure on any topic you bring up regarding source control, because when it's not
So
used
awesome.
properly, it hurts.
And we have a
It's
follow.
woo,
Thank you,
woo.
Coffee Stego.
Coffee Stego.
Coffee,
Solid name
coffee.
too. Is that like a cross between, like, of course, the drink and like dinosaurs?
Close.
Kinda
Did
cool.
So
we eat
coffee,
dinner? Because
coffee.
we've talked about Primavera, we've talked about forks, and now
I
we're
had
talking
pizza.
about coffee, obviously because of our follower. But it's like we're on a food theme tonight.
This is what happens when you let me lead. I mean, it's gonna happen.
Coffee actually has an interesting backstory to his name. There's another
Oh,
really big streamer that's name is T Rex, and
okay.
it's TEA Rex. So it's T Rex. So
Love it.
coffee sounds exactly like T Rex, and we always make fun of him for it while we're gaming. We're like, all right, T Rex, or we'd say like, all right, discount T Rex or Walmart Kmart T Rex. So he changed his name to Coffee Stego, like Stegosaurus coffee.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
I need to change my name now. I need to be Espresso Raptor, and then I can hang out with those
Be in the
cool
club.
people. Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, so again,
So
on that tangent, let's
reel it back in. Lee, so I happen to know in the data space, source control is hit or miss. Not everyone deals with it. That's pretty normal. What's your experience? How much have you dealt with source control in the data side of things?
I wish I could say I was really good at it, but I'm not. Um, I understand, high level concepts about source control for databases and code. Was actually the most I've touched it or worked with it is when you and I worked on it. And someday I will read all the cool things about products like Flyway from Redgate, or people talk about using either Git and or GitHub for source control and those kinds of things. So someday I'll read up about that, but that day has not arrived yet. But it'll be interesting to have this conversation and see what the two of you have to say, and we can talk about how that might touch the database at some point.
100%. Yeah.
I'm really
So, go on.
I was gonna say I'm really interested to see your guys' side of source control. I know what we do. I know the reasoning behind what we do as developers, but I'm curious to see how that plays into the database side and how that can benefit. I mean, honestly, how it can benefit me when doing the database stuff. So
Okay, yeah. So, all right. So let's get everyone caught up. I was just kind of, I just want to level set because people listening may not use source control, especially. I mean, our title is ready set data. You know, there's a bit of a data lean towards what we talk about,
Oh, yeah.
although you can't tell by our topics. On the data side of things, I don't think it's as pervasive as it is in the software development side. I was kind of expecting the answers I got. You know, I have the engineer, the software engineer on this call saying, use it all the time, use it for a long time, while the data professional was like, every once in a while, but I don't mess with it very much. And that's what I was hoping for because that's pretty common. So if you're
Yep.
listening in and you know, you're in the data side of things and not much in the development side of things, it's okay if it's kind of an alien concept, or it's okay if it's kind of a mystery. And that's what I was going for. So source control, its purpose is to maintain a single source of truth for development teams. So when you have solo development, and for the record, I think solo developers should definitely use source control as well, but it really shines in teams. Um, it helps facilitate the collaboration. So I don't know how big your code base is you work on, O'Grady, but you know usually with a project there's a lot of files, there's a lot of change and churn in those files, and in a code base with a decent sized team, especially if it's a project that's not sitting, it's not legacy sitting back in the dark vaults somewhere. Um, you guys have to make changes at the same time. In some cases, multiple teams.
Mhm.
And so where I'm going with this is the workflow tends to be, if you have source control, you're able to get the most recent code, its current state, right away, do your work, make your changes, and push those changes back up. And that allows your teammates to also get that. So if you just did it on your workstation and you pushed it up and there's no code and you just kind of treated what you pushed up as the source, you just put in a file system somewhere. You someone else clicking Control Save will overwrite the work, right? Um, so that's the core tenet right there. Allows multiple people to work in the same code base. There's other things it does, right? It protects the code. So if you are working locally, as developers are, you have your workstation, you have your code there, and you spend 2-3 days getting that story done, and then lightning strikes, something happens, building burns down, I don't know, hard drive failure, and your company doesn't back up your machine, that code's gone. It's 2-3 days worth of work out the window. Yeah.
What you just said, company doesn't back up its machines. My blood pressure is going up as you're describing this because I'm over here as the DBA going, that's what backups are for. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, but I meant
we're playing the
um,
company's role of ignoring the
workstation.
DBA and not backing.
To be clear, I meant the workstation too, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're working at a company, like actually I don't know how
Yeah,
uncommon
that's
or
right.
common it is, but I've been lucky that most companies I worked for have backups that exist of the machines that you're using, right? I can't speak to like how often it happens, but I know it exists.
Yeah.
But let's say it happens once a day, then you might still lose a full day's worth of work, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like your local. Like when I'm developing in local, I try to have smaller commits so that I don't know if you're going to go over this or not, but I try to keep my commits small so that I'm always checking something in throughout the day for test-driven development, and continuous integration, continuous deployment. But if you do that, all throughout the day, it's a lot easier that if my computer shuts down unexpectedly and I lose my local because I didn't hit save because whatever, then that's gone. Then but I can always pull from my last commit, and at least I'm maybe in an hour lost. And it's like, okay, that's not as bad. But yeah, if it's 8-9 hours, I'm like, oh God. Not saying I haven't been there.
And that's considered a best practice. So sorry everybody who got to see my finger when I turn my light on.
all good.
That's a design flaw. Yeah, it's a design flaw. They should have done,
No, you have
actual
to
testing on that.
sneak up underneath it. There we go.
Editor, please edit out all that shenanigans. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward. Yeah, that's actually considered best practice, and I am a firm believer. Commit often, and we can probably talk about mainline or branch later on, but if it works with the way your company handles things, push it up as often as possible.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, some might say open a pull request if you kind of have a GitHub flow. But where, like, for example, where I work, you commit locally, like you said, as regular as possible. So that way you have all the changes that you've made there in that day. And as often as is possible from a don't break anything standpoint, if you have a working piece of code and your tests pass, push it up twice a day. Some might argue more. I don't know. I'm not skilled enough to be pushing every hour. It takes me a long time to get stuff done, I feel like. But you do that often, right? And for reasons you said, the extreme paranoia, what if my laptop breaks, right? But it's not just that. If you have, like I said early on, a team of people working on it, you want to have your changes go out to them as often as possible.
Yep.
So you don't end up with 3 people, let's say, or more. Can you imagine, like, the people who work on the Linux kernel? They have a handful of people all over the world, or Android, hundreds of people. I'm making up numbers. I just know it's a lot.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine all those people committing up files? If they waited a week and all the work has to go up, the merge conflicts, which I guess I should talk about, would be
You
immense,
do need to talk
right?
about merge conflicts.
Yeah.
Spent a lot
So
of
you
time
want
on
to
them today.
I bet. And every once in a while, like, okay, I'll allow myself to focus. Yeah, I will talk about that. Yeah, so you want to put it up often as possible, because what you don't want to do is to make changes to a handful of files and then have, let's say, Lee making a changes some handful of files, and some of those files are the same. Now we both have files that have changed, and the system can't determine necessarily whose changes to go through, right? Because you basically have done them at the same time.
Well, my change
So
wins, obviously. I mean,
obviously, and then I got to explain to my project manager why my code's gone, right?
Yeah.
Or
somebody
yours
does.
went. Yeah, somebody does. Lee's like, I don't have to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the more often you send it out, the lower the chances of a merge conflict.
Yeah.
And it also increases the chance when you get a merge conflict that the conflict is small, right? And so what is a merge conflict? It's basically when 2 people are making changes and the system can't determine whose changes are going to win or should win. And so, we need some human involvement. Someone to look at the code and be like, well, okay, you happen to be changing the same method, or to make this, a database specific, 2 people made changes to the same table, right? Somehow, because you know what happens, someone's adding a column to a table, someone's changing something in a table, and then now the system's like, you need to tell me the order of operations here, right? That's a merge conflict, and I've heard some horror stories. I'm lucky that most of the merge conflicts that I've dealt with are pretty simple once you sit down and you look at it. But
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty lucky. I haven't got burned with bed. Now I know what's happening tomorrow. I've jinxed myself.
Yep. I will make a call. I have no one left to
You'll
call.
make a call.
Oh.
Karma's got me.
The only person I've left there is you. I'm gonna call you and be like, make merge conflicts. It's not gonna go over as well.
Sure, whatever you say, O'Grady. I mean, I'm not gonna argue. Were you about to say something, Lee?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this idea of merge conflicts and in source control, and I thought about Google Docs or shared Excel files or a shared Excel workbook. I should be more correct.
As in, when you change it, it's automatically changing everywhere? like that way.
Yeah. So if we have the and you're going, I started to say feel free to tell me, but you will tell me if I'm off with this. But an analogy I thought of was Google Docs or like a shared Excel files with the
Hmm.
three of us, or all working on an Excel, say for, I don't know, topics for a live stream. And we're all making changes to stuff. There has to be something in the background that keeps track of who's doing what to what row, and that sort of thing. That's what I thought about when we're talking about source control, one copy of the truth, and merge conflicts. So is that a fair analogy? Is that
Yeah.
how is that, does it fit? Is it off in some way?
I think that's a fair analogy, and I think maybe we can use that to kind of explain why it's a problem for source controls like Git. Um, One of the benefits of the shared document, like we're all in the same Word document or Excel document, is that we offer up a change, or we don't. The application on computer does, and it gets to that server, and that server takes them in time order, and then it makes everything happen time order. What time it received it, or you typed it in, I don't
Hmm.
know I don't know the difference, is the truth, right? And so if sean types over me Sean types over me, no. So that that's I want to argue easier, right?
Yeah.
With source control like Git, if we have people working locally. So we are not reporting back to the Google Doc, for example. So the Git example would be if all of us downloaded the Excel sheet locally. We made all of our changes for 3 hours and then we offered them back up. That is not nearly as simple as what happens with your example. So
Right.
that would be the fundamental difference. And I think it is a good analogy, but
Yeah.
it shows the problem. And that's what Git was supposed to solve. It was supposed to allow people to
Okay.
work locally and not have to constantly be connected. Um, and also to allow you to work and get something, a unit of work done before you offer it up. Kind of like what I alluded to earlier. You know, push it up often,
Yeah.
but it has to be a good work unit of work.
Yeah. We you definitely want to have a working agreement with your team, possibly with your management, on what is considered good enough to check in on our team. All tests must pass, and it must build without errors or errors at least. Warnings were kind of iffy on because we're building a new code base right now, so it's like every now and then we go through and scrape for errors or for warnings and get rid of all the, oh, you're missing a tab or you have an extra space. So we try to do that as like one check-in so that we don't have to actually go through and do code approvals or code reviews. If someone says, hey, this is just a cleanup check-in, we can be like, cool, because we don't have to look at that. I'm going to assume that you took some spaces out, you fixed a nested if statement, or whatever you're doing, that it's mostly just kind of muscle memory for us. So you want to have that working agreement with your team that says, hey, if I'm doing this, there's these steps we have to go through. Now, if I'm doing this, I need a code review. I need, the different steps on. I don't know if you're going to talk about the different steps of the check-in process. Um, yeah, communication though is key there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's different. I don't know all of them, but there's different kind of methodologies or patterns that people use. Whether the two that I'll talk about, and if you guys happen to know of others, feel free. But basically, branching
Mhm.
or mainline. Branching is like me and my team is working on a particular item, and so what we do is we take the source of truth, the code that's out. Let's say it's a web app that's running out there in the real world, and then we break it into a branch, and then that code goes down to my computer and back up, down to Susie's computer and back up, down to James' computer and back up, and then we are all working on that piece that's not right now the source of truth. And when we're happy with it, we can push that up. So we can make kind of like a upside down tree where people working on different branches. O'Grady could have his own branch, Lee could have his own branch, and then we merge them in. And there's reasons why you would do that. That feels every methodology will have its problems, its complexities, but that feels very complex to me. The way I think, I totally get why. Like O'Grady is working on bug fixes. Like his team, hypothetically, I don't know what your team does, but hypothetically in this scenario, your team is the Warriors knocking out bugs when people find out about them, and you patch them. You guys handle that, so you need to pull down from the main line. Your team swarms. When you're happy with it and it passes tests, you push it back up, right? Meanwhile, Lee's team is taking a slower approach because they're working on something completely different. They're working on not even a feature. There's a new technology out that they need to incorporate with, and it's going to take 6 weeks of work to link that up. So Lee's team brings down a branch, and they work on that, and they're bouncing up and down. And when they have a nugget of good work after a period of time, they bring theirs back in.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I feel like it's complicated is O'Grady's team did something, and that has to be mixed back in with Lee's before his can fit. And that's where when you hear people talking about merge conflicts and everything, I feel like that's where the really big ones come in. The methodology, yes.
So, is there a mechanism that tells Lee's team that O'Grady's team is playing in the same sandbox, and you need to know that so that you don't undo O'Grady's work?
So no, because
say not really.
What happens is you can't push it back up though, because it'll know that there's stuff missing, right? Because there's a history in there, and it's I don't want to call it GUID, but there's like these labels that I wish I looked up before this. I didn't know I was talking about it.
Well,
That
that's my
says
thing. I'm
all
like,
the
I want to pull
steps.
mine up, but I can't pull it up because obviously very
Yeah.
sensitive data. So-
Yeah. So, but I'll just use numbers, right? There's commit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to 100. Years of commits, and then or months, whatever. And then there's O'Grady's commits, and then there's Susie's commits, and then Lee and his team have a whole bunch of commits they want to bring in, but they're missing O'Grady's and Susie's. So they can't bring it in because O'Grady's and Susie's are in there before. So in order to merge it in, you have to bring the source back down. And if this is kind of hurting your head, that's okay.
It's
No,
supposed
makes
Like you got to
sense.
bring, yeah. So you got to bring those in, and then that way, when you bring those in, if there's conflicts, like, oh, we both are changing the same thing, your project, because you're using Polybase, you get to not use some code anymore, right? So, but O'Grady's team worked on a bug fix in the code that you're getting rid of. So you have to look at that and go, is it okay that I'm overwriting this method? This method's gone now. Is that okay? In that scenario, yes. You're like, guys, this is something that we decide we don't need anymore. The problem they're fixing is not a problem anymore. Yeah. You might be okay with that, and you have to make that decision to merge. And once you solve that and everyone's code is happy, then you can finally merge it up into the main line. So,
Okay.
I wonder if this will work. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
I'm not either. Didn't work like I thought it would. But we're almost there.
Oh, you're trying to get a visual up?
Ah. Everything wants to keep snapping to my screen, and that is semi-annoying.
We're experimenting live, guys.
Can you?
Bear with us.
Look, you can kind of see it. It's not working like I wanted it to. But you can see the path. This is a Git path where you have trunk development.
I'll try to talk about it once it stops moving.
You know what I can do? You know what? We can just say, I'm putting this in the Discord. Everybody go check it. Makes more sense.
You could share your screen too, and instead of us being on the screen, we would see the picture. But however you want to do it.
I'll throw in Discord now, and I need to make a new presentation view overlay. I guess. Yeah, like a presentation overlay. So when we're
Or
talking
when I
about
do
some
stuff like
stuff
that.
like this, that would require more of a visual.
I
But
was
yep,
wondering
I'll
what
throw
was
in
happening
Discord for
because there were
anybody that wants to follow along.
funky things happening on the screen. I was like, I'm not sure what's happening.
You know,
What's going on?
sometimes I just
Um,
don't know what's going on.
We're talking about branching and merging.
yeah, I was just waiting for the conversation to get back
There
to
you go.
it.
So
Okay.
if you go to the
Oh, yeah.
general, you have a chart that you can follow while you talk. Maybe that might help.
So basically, if you look at the image that he shared in Discord, you'll see that it basically has a starting point and it splits up into several. It's interesting the way he has it drawn. I always see it like, and you can kind of tell by the way I use my hands, like the main line's the top and branches just come down. His kind of splits
Yeah.
and like that. But it doesn't matter. However, works best in your mind. You have the main one. That's the one that goes out to the public, let's say, if it's a web app. That's the source of truth. Everything else is branches where people were working and they have to merge it back in. Um, the other version, so that was all branching. The other version, the way that I tend to work, is just pure mainline, right? I say pure. We sometimes need to make a branch.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a fact of life that sometimes somebody's working on something and it's going to be more than a day before they have something workable that's okay to go into the main line. But the general idea is, and I think O'Grady touched on this a little bit when he was talking about his practices. Um, you take the main line, you pull it down locally, you now have the source of truth, you make your changes, and then you don't push it back up until you have workable code. It has complexities too. It means that if you're doing something that's really complicated and you don't want it to be open for multiple days because you don't want to run into merge conflicts or fall behind,
Yep.
you don't want O'Grady's team to put in 1,000 commits before you put it back up. So you got to pull those down and do that work of merging it in. You might have to break it up. You might have to do smaller pieces that aren't as useful just to get some changes in, get your unit tests and everything else under wraps. Everything looks good, so that way you can make the commit up. And then if you're GitHub, you're like, I'm making a pull request because you want them to pull yours up.
Mhm.
Or where I work, I use Azure DevOps version of Git, and I just push it up to the main line, and then it's there. If your tests work and you have DevOps people who make sure that systems are automated, so they'll know if there's problems right away. You're protected from bad code going up, hopefully. Um, I happen to like that way. Yes, I have to do a little bit of extra work per commit to make sure that everything's good every single time, but
Mhm.
I feel like that makes the code base a little bit steady, stabler, right? Um, and then also, like I said, we push up. The unit tests get tested out on the server. The integration tests fire off. Everything has to show healthy when it does, and then it gets pushed up to dev. We kind of accidentally touched on continuous integration, which is actually something we'll be covering later in a different session, and continuous deployment. But they're all related, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't have continuous integration or deployment unless you have source control and you have some sort of practice like branching or on mainline. So
Yeah.
any
We
question on those two things?
I would say I agree with you on definitely source control branching. So I believe you do. So is yours considered trunk based development still?
Yeah, mainline. Well, I call
Mainline
it
trunk.
mainline
Yeah.
because yeah, I think those might be synonymous, but
It's probably
yeah,
why we
basically,
draw
yeah, there's no point.
different ways. Because I always
Yeah, maybe
I go trunk based, which is a tree, and then you go
vertical, and I
mainline, which
always think of
is
it horizontally.
it's interesting.
Yeah, we got this, and then somebody pulls out and they're below, and they come back up.
Yeah, I put both pictures in the Discord of different ways to visualize it. But the
Awesome.
yeah, no, it's huge advantages when you get branching. You talked about different teams going off, make another branch. For us, our one team, we'll say currently, is building a new application. So we're building a new code base essentially.
Awesome greenfield
Uh,
work. That's great.
oh, I love it so much. TDD is a lot easier when you start from nothing, because it's like, okay, first test, write it. What's it do? Log in. Okay, we can now log in. It says we can log in. Next test. Then you just literally can get online. It's so much better than trying to dig in. But with
We
that
didn't do
being
a show
said,
on TDD, did we? Test driven development.
no,
We
but
didn't do
we
that yet, did
will. We will
we? Thank you.
definitely
Please
do.
do. That'd be great.
But yeah, so with what we've been doing a lot of mobbing, which I've talked about in the past, but it plays a lot into source control. The mob tool actually, I don't know if it's ran through Git or how it's set up. We set it up, but I don't remember exactly the details. But all it is a command line interface that you say mob start, and then it actually creates a branch based off of whatever current branch you're on and starts a new mob session. Everything that happens after that, and we do like mob next, the next person can take over. They do a mob start, and it keeps transferring my stuff to the next person. This is outside of source control. So at the end, we do mob done. And what that does, it checks it all in. And it says at the bottom after mob done, it says to continue, do git commit. So it does all this work for you. And it separates a branch. You get to be, I don't know, feel a little safer because you're not developing on trunk or anything like that. But you also don't have to do it yourself. So as soon as we do a mob start, we get that offshoot. We do all the work we want, however many check-ins we want, and then we do a mob done, and it brings it all back over to the trunk using a squash, git squash. So it's a little easier for us to do these separate branches because I might be working on, I don't know, authentication. Currently I am, which is funny because I worked on authentication at the place we all worked at. So same authentication as well. The second authentication, not the first authentication that you remember.
Okay.
Anyway, you remember Hunter? I did the job. Okay. Anyway, if I'm working on authentication and another team's working on, I don't know, logout, something, whatever, there's chances we're going to be touching the same actual files. It's not even like we're touching the same application or we're touching the same solution. We are sometimes in the exact same calls. So at that point, it does, we'll have merge conflicts, which we'll deal with because we know we're in the same files. But it really does come down to communication, saying, hey, I know you are working in these files in a very similar, it touches the same stuff I'm touching. Like at that point, we usually sit down or get on video before we do a merge, and we talk about like, what did you do? Is there a way that what you did could simplify what I needed to do? Because sometimes I'm writing code against something and it's not finished code. So, merge conflicts, sometimes we can say, let's put our heads together here, figure out which way is better to do this, and then join them. Now, that's not always, but
Yeah, sometimes it's a no-brainer. Sometimes one can get rid of the other. Sometimes you legitimately, like in your situation, like the scenario you just pointed out, legitimately both two people making changes to the same method, right?
And both legitimate changes.
Do a thing, and both of you doing it, and then it has to both be in there. And so you go, okay, how do we both do this? And then you guys might have to work together on it. And I've heard of places having people who legit, that's a big part of their job is just handling the continuous deployments and making it, handling merge conflicts and and coordinating when branches can actually get pushed back to the main line. I don't know if that sounds like an awesome job or not. Maybe to the right people. Stringer's Fool saying, I guess DevOps is being deprecated over the years as GitHub will be taken over according to, he didn't finish the statement yet. But yeah, he was asking like, isn't it going away? I don't know. I know that the push is to go to GitHub. I at least I feel that. But you got to remember this is Microsoft, and
Yeah.
they don't. They're not Google. They don't deprecate really fast.
They
Right?
got rid of
They tend to
XP
have
in
like that.
2012.
That was around forever, and then even when it was
Mhm.
no longer around, there was special clauses if you were
Mhm.
willing to pay up enough money to keep it going, right?
And
And then they
XP
finally pulled it.
was it XP Business, I think it was, a professional. One of them actually had like 4 or 5 more years of support, and they just didn't say anything about it. They're like,
Yeah,
it's gone.
it's gone. No one's paying, so it's gone.
Strenuous was also
So
asking
yeah,
about mob. I mentioned mob, and I've talked about it a little bit in the past, but yeah. So mobbing is, at least the way we define it, a lot of times in development, is when 3 or more developers are working together on the same to solve the same problem. So it might be, hey, you're working on authentication today with these 2 other developers. All 3 of you focused on authentication on the same computer or sharing a screen. The way we do it is I drive, or one of us drives, one person navigates, and one person takes notes. That's the 3 main roles. And then after 12 minutes, we switch. The next person drives, which is just literally typing. The next person navigates, which is telling that person what to type. And then the next person takes notes. So we rotate through all those all day. So everybody gets hands-on time to do the code. Everybody gets hands-on time to explain the code and take notes on the code. So there's no reason that anyone on the team should be like, I don't know what's going on. Like, you were there.
yeah. I feel like that's like peer programming to another extreme.
It is. It's
I
just
feel
the
like
next step up of peer programming.
yeah, I feel like that'll alleviate some of the issues. Let me know if I'm speaking out of line, Lee. For some of the issues that I've heard in the past, where it's like, I really wish I was better at T-SQL, but I have to do these problem all the time. Well, if your company has a policy that you are doing with your team, then you're through osmosis, company
Sure.
sponsored, helping deal with it, right? When you're not even
Yeah.
typing, you're taking notes. When you're typing and someone's talking over, and then when you're the one driving, the people are like,
Um,
"Hey, did you know?" And
and I say
Yeah.
notes, but I meant documentation.
yeah,
I say notes, but
okay,
I don't know if we had a show on documentation yet, but that would be a good one too.
that'd also be a good one.
But documentation, because that's
I
super
thought if you
important.
wrote good code, it just
Actually,
documents itself. You just
you
repeat it.
know, that's
Do you work at an agile shop?
I
I'm
Do we
about
have
to
any
have
start a fight, I
documentation?
think.
I have heard someone say that. Of course, I've also read the Iliad and the Odyssey from some freaking developers, and I don't want to go through their code. So,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
Craftsman says it does when I do.
today I was
Okay.
fixing some nested if statements and turning them into one-liners and just cleaning all this stuff up. And the person I was pair programming with was like, "This isn't like necessary." I'm like, "Yeah, but I want to be able to read it. Like, line 1 goes to line 2, goes to line 3, goes to line 12, go through that, then go back to line 4. It's like progressive common sense development. It helps a lot more than it seems.
Yeah, simple code I think is better. I'm not one for code golf. I know some people like to turn everything into one-liners, which I don't think
No,
was
yeah.
what you were trying. I don't think that's what you were trying to say.
No,
But
this
yeah,
was
when you
a
have something
double nested
complicated,
if statement that actually just needed to be 2 different if statements that were both 1 line each.
yeah,
I'm like, well, let's just do this easier.
a person should just read the code and not have to draw a picture after looking at it, in my opinion.
And Strenuous said 3's a mob, 4 is a riot. Technically, 3 is what we call a truplet. Don't know where the word came from. If it's even a real word, we call it a truplet. And 4 is a official mob. But we're missing some people on our team right now, so 3 is an official mob.
Oh,
That's
it's
where we're
not
going.
just me that's short-staffed.
It's everyone. It's
It's
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah.
So
And do you when you do you do 3 or more, or do you do, or have you ever done this type of mobbing or anything?
The only time I've done a mob was a long time ago. Wasn't at the company I'm at now, and we had auditorium. There was a big screen, and there was 20 more people. I didn't even know everybody in the room, and we had 20 more people, and the presenter was like, "We're gonna write some code." I don't even remember what the scenario was because it was just such a cluster.
Yeah.
It was fun though, and he's like, "Just yell out what do you want me to do. We're gonna get this out." And then so the first person said something, the second person said something, and then so he was just typing what people were saying. He was like, "Oh, let's try it, run it." Oh no, it's not there yet, and we had to get all the tests to pass and stuff. And I mean, it was
That'd be
kind
a
of fun.
fun like presentation to be at.
Yeah,
That would
I
be
mean,
an
it was just
interesting experiment. I'm sorry I
Yeah.
missed that.
yeah. No, this was before the company I background work at, so before I worked with you guys. But it was interesting, and it wasn't to. In this case, it wasn't to accomplish anything. Like it was
Yeah.
an arbitrary task. It's like let's build a calculator app. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But we had to get all the tests to fail, and there were some inputs, and there was a bunch of tests, and we had to knock it out. And it was just to get us work together. It was just a tangential experiment, I guess. Yeah, just team building, whatever. It was fun and still
I mean,
programming.
It seems like it'd be really fun to be a part of, honestly. Like something maybe we should try sometime.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys want to code our ways through some tutorials, code katas or something?
I mean, might be see it. We'll see in Discord if how many people are actually up for learning.
Oh, you want to get the audience in on it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Like.
Oh, okay.
I know there's a couple.
Now, okay.
I know there's at least 4 or 5, if not more, devs / amateur devs, if you want to call it that, play around devs that
Code curious.
Code that would be a great channel name. Code.
That's our next project.
Oh God. So yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
It could be
That
interesting.
would be interesting.
I have a T-SQL thing we could do at some point. Something I just tried to solve and spent time on and then abandoned. So anyway, go ahead. You were going to move on, I think.
I was thinking about it. So, yeah, one of the other benefits, I know we explained a handful of things, and I don't think we touched on all the benefits. Another benefit isn't just your computer goes down. You can turn back time. So real life, I'm not gonna get too deep in the situation, but a real life example right now is we have some production issues. In order to troubleshoot, we had to roll back in time. We had to take things and set them up in a previous place. Many things. If you didn't have source control or you didn't save previous versions, you couldn't do that, right? And you could complete a couple tasks in your story or even complete a couple stories, get to the end goal and realize things are really messed up. You didn't realize until it got out there. Well, with source control, you can go back and try it in different scenarios. You can even go back, let's say you don't want to roll back to those older versions, but because everything's in that commit tree, you can look at what someone did. Ex coworker put out a bunch of code and then they left, and you want to look at what they did to find out what they got rid of because you need it back. You can look at that. You can find out exactly what they added and when. It's all that history's in there. You can't get that by saving a file over another file, right? And you can't get that just with like a daily snapshot, which I don't want to overload database terms here, but you can't get that if you're just copying your hard drive once a day or putting no one here I'm sure has done this, but you have something you're working on and you save it into a folder and you name it version 1, you save it to another folder version 2. I'm sure no one's done that. Zip files are source control, but but that will let you go backwards, but you can't see the actual changes, and Git lets you do that. Source control.
You have to do like a beyond compare on 2 files that are both on your desktop from a week apart.
Kind of, but you don't know the individual changes.
No.
If it's a daily thing, then you just know what happened that day.
Yeah.
Like there could be, why'd this thing change? It's easier to suss it out when you see that person did one thing and then committed it, as opposed to if you had all the changes that happened that day from 5 people.
Yeah.
Right, and then it got put up on the server. So yeah, that really helps with that. It really helps keeping the team working on the same thing. Um,
Yeah. And,
if
oh, sorry.
Go on.
I would say on that note, with the knowing what your teammates are doing, source control, I think all of them have a check-in message. So you don't even have to worry about being like, oh, I see that you changed this case statement or whatever you're doing. You can be like, oh, let me see what the note says. Made login easier by calling this other method. So you don't even have to look at the code if you're doing source control properly. You can look at the notes.
Yeah. That's if people are actually putting decent notes in there. I mean, sometimes we got some comical commit messages. We're like, this should work. No, this time I got it. Here, this is the final one. Yes, now it works. Those aren't helpful commit messages, although they do help me realize that you were having trouble last night. um, or recently, true story, I saw a bunch of commits. Somebody was making a lot of changes really fast, and they got tired of typing messages, so it was just period, 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 period. Finally, like
Yep. Which,
Can you create a rule to stop them from doing that?
you could, but you make those
Yeah.
rules, and instead of doing period, they'll say gobbledygook,
Yeah.
right? Those
Oh my god.
again,
you
that's
know.
about changing the mentality of what people think about source control and making sure everyone knows how useful it is and how useful it can, or how useless it can be if you do it incorrectly.
Yeah. To Streamers Fool's question. So curious from experience how much code or commits, etc., you think is not properly documented, commented. So there's a couple different things there.
So on
We're
that
talking
note,
yeah. We're talking about source control. I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my environment I work in now, other than the jokes I just made, most of them are like, I did a thing. I know when I was originally on the support team, a lot of times there would be, this takes care of ticket blah, right? So they weren't exactly a thesis, which I would argue they shouldn't be. They were at least useful. Um, now, it also mentioned like how much code you think is not documented or commented correctly. The documentation, I wonder if anyone actually does a good job documentation. O'Grady, would you say you do?
I do.
Your team? Your team's good at it?
I'm good at it, and I'm on my team, so my team's good at it.
Well, you did mention that when you mob, someone is supposed to be doing
Yeah.
documentation well. So
Yeah, so the way
that's
we do
good.
it is you just straight take notes while you're doing the mobbing or while you're throughout the day. And then once you finish a chunk, we take those notes and say, okay, because sometimes those notes are useless because the next person deletes everything you just did because we have a new way to do it. So you take
Yeah.
those notes, you condense them, and then you create documentation out of it. Again, I think documentation can easily be its own show because
It
there's a
could.
lot
I'm
that
just
goes
gonna
into it.
throw something out there that I really hate. I hate when
Goods.
yes, I hate GUIDs
As
too, as you
primary
know.
keys.
Definitely as primary keys. Yeah, don't do that. But I hate when people say, "Oh, documentation is useless because as soon as you write it, it's out of date." And I'm like, "Well, not if you update it."
That's the hard part. You have to have a company that agrees with you on that.
cares
And you
about
have
it.
to have a culture that has that built in.
Mhm.
So I mean,
Or do you,
I agree with you, but I also feel that way sometimes, right? It's not correct. Some people would argue that we
yeah,
shouldn't have a huge dependence on documentation, but like I feel that way sometimes. I feel like, yeah, I want to document this, but if the next person who works on a ticket doesn't give a hoot about documentation, I feel like I'm talking to a wall, and I've definitely opened up documentation from other companies, which drives me nuts when like we have a third party application I'm dealing with, an API from another company. This is happening right now that I'm dealing with, and then I'm like, this documentation is glorious. This almost is as good as if Lee made it. And then I go through it, and then, well, this is wrong. This is inaccurate.
Yeah.
Was this ever true? And it's like, oh man.
That's what
So
people
yeah.
don't realize. Documentation isn't for the developers. I know how the code works. I wrote it. It's for anybody that needs to use our application or future developers that need to see what I did. So, especially third party, like if we're using our, if we're writing something for a third party to be used, if we're giving an application over to someone to use, my documentation is going to be freaking golden because that's my name on that application, and the only place they have to reference it is my documentation.
Yeah.
Or me, and I
Yeah.
don't want them calling me. So,
Yeah, and then when
No.
I mentioned API a second ago, and I know any of the API developers in the chat want to tell me I'm right or wrong. But if you make an API, even if you're using internally, if it's going out, if it's something that another company will use, which a lot of times other entities use your API,
Mhm.
other internal teams, whatever, how you want to look at it, it's got to be documented, in my opinion. Now I know there's things that help like Swagger and everything else, but it's got to be. Craftsman, it says you have documentation. And, so Stradius Fool is said is kind of doubling down on his question about how often do you think companies are good at documentation. He says, seriously looking over the industry, if you dropped into some place as like a consultant, let's say,
Mhm.
would you say they have bad documentation? Said another way, would you think, hey, a great company still has 30% bad documentation? As an example, that second part I feel like muddies the waters. Like, are they, like saying they're a great company but they don't have good documentation? I think culture is everything at every company, and it doesn't matter if we're talking tech, how
Yeah.
people treat each other. So there could be a
Well,
great company and have culture problems, right? Were you gonna say something or?
well, I'm wanting to talk about what do we even mean when we say documentation. So, do we mean that I'm going to go back to my world, but it applies I know that software engineers have comments that you put or can put into your application code as well. So in T-SQL, we write stored procedures. And at the top of them, you have a block of code, of comment
Mhm.
that says, Lee made this on this day for this. And then below that, O'Grady puts his name and says, modified on this day, made Lee's stuff better by doing X.
Is that what you're supposed to put at the top of store procedures?
Yeah.
Anthony, this day made this change.
Mhm.
Is that what we're talking about when we say documentation? Or are we talking about some external Word doc that says X, Y, and Z about something? Or do we mean both?
I'd argue for me it's both, and that's because in the database, not everybody has special um, documentation. Not everyone has good source control. I I I'm big on source control in the database. I'm big on having a pipeline, but I barely say ours is good. Like we just early days. We're still growing there, and so within the database, I feel like you do have to have that little block in the store product that says yo dog, here's the dealio, right? And say who created it. And there's a lot of meta information there. Sometimes you see who created it if you knew them. There's some people I've never met that kind of know how they code now. When I see their name at the top of a proc, I know what I'm in for, good or bad, great or wonderful, great, wonderful, whatever.
People I know
I
that
know
I can
they
read the
have this
proc and
strategy.
know whose name is on the top.
That's true. That's actually 100% true. Like you'll see patterns or whatever. Like this CTE has a CTE that has CTE that uses a CTE. Anthony's been here clearly. Uh, so so yeah, I would argue both. It just depends on how it works. I do have trouble with the whole Word doc strategy because not every place knows how to do that. Where I'm at now, documentation is not awesome. Usually when I see it's okay, it's like in a wiki and it's done by, a more senior developer or an architect. But us, lower boots in the grounds people usually are still struggling to get stuff done. So we need someone to push us to do that. Now, I was gonna do something else. Now I lost my thought. Wiki. Oh, I've been in another company where they did use the Word docs. They did literally Word documents for documentation for like everything, unless an Excel sheet was better. And they actually did a really good job of it. But that other company was a bank, and they had large, ginormous teams. And there's teams who did that. That's what they did. I don't mean a person. I mean there was teams, but
Mhm.
that's what they did. So when I changed the process, I end up in meetings with somebody going over the changes I made. They have a diff in Word, 2 words, and 2 Word documents, and they're going through the diffs, and they mean business. But that's why those docs work there. Other places, again, my bias to Lee's point, it gets that Word document was looked at in 3 months, 3 years. So
And on
Okay,
Craftsman's
we got
point
some.
here,
You go
yeah.
ahead.
So on Craftsman's point, because I feel like he has the same outlook as I do from
Push
a
control.
engineering developer standpoint. But like you said, that's really good in the stored procedures when we get in there, so that I can see, okay, that's what this is doing, just like a quick synopsis. But when it comes to, if I'm talking documentation as far as the true sense of the word, I'm meaning I have a Confluence page set up. I have like 40 Confluence pages set up for each section of our team. It's not just code documentation, it's working agreements, it's schedules, it's phone numbers that we use for each other. Everything's documented. And when we talk about code documentation, I break it out to technologies used, um, any call that's being made. Like pretty much every method has a documentation attached to it saying, hey, this method calls our very basic outline. I'm not going through the entire thing. But like Craftsman said, I put the why. Login, what do we have, like async login method. All that does, what is this for? It's to log people in. We call the second method in case that's confusing. Here's a little flow chart, whatever. But it's literally so someone can jump in, look at the document or look at the code, and if they have any questions about the code, they can look at the documentation and know the why that happened. And then that extends to your current topic today, obviously, because part of that is proper messages in your check-ins. I consider that part of documentation as well. So
Yeah. I agree with Craftsman, what he's saying. It's just that in the database, our
yeah,
source control game isn't as good, right? Depends on your environment. Some environments are probably doing great. Some, everyone's in their own part of that journey. Unfortunately, even though we do have source control, it's mostly for the migration scripts. Even though we have continuous integration and continuous deployment, it's mostly migration based. We haven't quite gotten the manpower behind making it so that we can literally make a change to just one stored proc and make that commit. It's a migration script, and then we make the commit, and we can have the note there, right? So there's a
is
lot of
there
meta there.
was there any issue with, or is there that you guys would know of you guys using your scripts and stored procedures and using a like a fork or a source control that would be normally used in development,
No, I don't.
or is
So
that how you do
once
it?
you, yeah,
Is that how you guys do it?
we use Git.
Oh,
It's
for
Git
your
in
for
Azure
data side and
DevOps.
development side.
Yes.
Okay.
So when we have a new change to the stored proc, right? And I make the changes, I change the notes at the top. Um, I commit that, right? Um, to be clear though, I kind of mentioned this. There's state based and migration based, and we're migration based. So there's a change
Yep.
script that's making that change, and we commit that and we have the source control.
Okay.
So yeah, so we can use Git, and we use Visual Studio because it has that GUI built in that you mentioned earlier. But anyone can use the command line if they're savvy. They can use GUIs. It's all good. I literally, the only reason why I use Visual Studio right now is because I know so many people already know how to use it for Git in my environment where I work, all the developers, and I was really want to make sure it's easy for developers as possible.
Yeah.
I know there's people who use the command line. I know there's people that use. I don't know about Fork, but they have their favorite
I mean, it's
web
just a
app, not
Git.
web
It's
app,
just a
app.
skinned Git thing.
Yeah, and,
You know.
and then that works because
Mhm.
Azure DevOps Git is really just Git.
Yeah, even in Fork, you can open up the CLI and type in, git commit, and it'll work just fine. They just also happen to have a button that does the same thing, but it's skinned. I'm like, I'll take that. I like the graphs, and like the like I said,
Well, Gray
trunk-based
likes big
development.
graphs,
Like,
and he cannot lie.
it's true. It's true.
Nice.
Very true.
Nice.
Yeah.
But like Strenuous is saying here, so the unseen area doesn't understand it when a developer leaves with weak documentation culture that they're going to be paying for it, essentially, where they would be saving money if this is if the developer's leaving for money. I think a lot of us are at the point where we're not leaving places for money anymore. We're leaving because we want to work at a better place. But if that's the culture either way, yeah, they would save a lot of money by throwing in an extra 15 grand for the developer than they would getting a new developer that also has to learn everything that was not documented. Most likely that new developer is going to be super stressed because there's no documentation and probably quit anyway. So
yeah,
also keep that in mind.
Strenuous Fools making the argument that like you're talking
God.
about, when someone leaves, they it's hard to replace them.
I've never heard of that happening, Craftsman, but I'm sure it's a standard thing that people don't want to punch people for.
Oh my gosh, I just read that. I was like, what are you guys reacting to? Not to mention when the developer deletes all your documentation on the way out.
You hurt my soul a little bit with that message there.
Twist the knife.
We've seen that happen, in case you guys can't tell. Press F to pay respects.
Yeah, my F key got deleted.
Anyway, so Strenuous Fool says, when a developer walks out the door, that costs the company money just because someone else has to get up to speed. Or more than one person, it's a lot of that. And I agree. The only thing I'll challenge is, and you let me know if you agree or disagree, Strenuous. I have a hunch. I know which way you'd lean. It's not just developers. When someone has been working at a company for a while and they have all that intimate tribal knowledge, it doesn't matter if they're a developer or not. When they leave the company, they take a lot with them, and that company will feel the loss, especially the coworkers. So, yeah.
Yep. And for anybody curious, we're not going to get into the story, but when you leave a company, do not delete anything off of your computer.
Nope.
You can get in a lot of trouble.
Don't be a bad person.
Don't try to screw over your fellow people. Just in general,
not
in
hurting the
life, don't try to
company.
screw anybody over.
Yeah, you're not actually screwing over the company. You're hurting all your coworkers. So
yeah, causing a lot of stressful late nights. So,
but if you have everything in source control, even when they ruin it, you can backtrack, right? You can get it back.
That's why we now use Confluence at my company, which is backed up by its own source control, as opposed to what we had when that happened.
At the other place,
which was that was on.
Well, now
what was that on? Git.
It was in Azure.
Azure.
But it wasn't in source. It wasn't source control.
It wasn't ever backed
up. Now it is. And my pipelines are back on Git. There's commits there. If there's a problem with one of by pipelines I mean the continuous integration, continuous deployment, all those are in Git. So if there's a problem, we can backtrack. I'd have to get one of the DevOps guys involved, but we can roll those back. Same thing, SSIS. Our SSIS packages now. Anything that me and my coworkers, like my team. There's other people who interact with SSIS who aren't on the source control bandwagon. Yes, Lee.
You know the integration catalog is source control for you, right? It
No.
can revert a package back.
Okay, let me rephrase. Yes, I
Yes.
know it can do that, but
Okay.
no, that is not source control.
It
Right.
reverts to that version.
It's a single backspace.
A
Undo.
VMware backup of yesterday reverts. Is that source control?
Technically, it's
I
it's
don't-
more
I can argue
archiving.
what it is,
There's
but
there's no commits, right? There's no
That's
there's no
archiving.
history I can look at. Can't see the changes. I can't go, what did O'Grady do in SSIS? Right? I can't look at that. And
The question's been asked a lot.
you could download the version of that package and open it. Pretty sure.
and then do a diff between what O'Grady did and what's there today.
Sure.
And what if
But you can't
it's
see
actually
my
changed by
five
Lee?
check-ins from
Well,
Well, then
yesterday.
it's an awesome change, and we don't have to talk about it.
Okay.
But I want to know how he did it. Okay, but yeah, so I've had
I
these
wanted to know the
conversations.
why.
I don't know why. Why would you do this? Well, if it was awesome, you probably
Well-
don't care.
After you make your next point, I have one that we haven't even talked about, and it's near and dear to my heart.
Oh God,
What was my next point?
we
I
have
don't
points.
know. I'm waiting
Was
on
that a
you.
mill something? I'll mention even my SSIS is in source control, so that way, the big thing is for me the big thing. So source control is great, but it's the continuous integration and deployment. So I make a change in SSIS, I commit that, I can move on, and then dev is now running my code, right?
Yep.
And if that works out in tests, I can move it up. People and other people can get the latest without having to go to the integration catalog and download something and
Mhm.
go to some wizard and do some things, and then 20 minutes later they have they have the source code, which may or may not be the same that's on my computer. But I digress.
We have ours 1 minute. We have between switching drivers. So by the time my time's up driving, which, like I said, that's me typing while the navigator tells me what to type. But by me typing, meaning that means I'm controlling the source of truth. I'm controlling what's going to go into source control. We give 1 minute between one driver to the next. That means that gives me time to check in and the next person to check it out. So it's just a handoff. That's how long it should take. If it's taken longer than that, then things need to be smoothed out on the team's end, because it could just be they're not using the most efficient way. There's different ways to do everything, and maybe that team isn't as efficient doing it the way that they're currently doing it. But if I say, hey, Anthony, go look at this code, I should be able to walk over to your desk and have you pull it up within a minute of me telling you that. So just a little guideline that we go by, at least.
And I think
And again,
Lee
that's
wanted
we're
to
good at
point,
it, so it's like different too.
Yeah,
but
I
I
like
want
that.
also. Are you guys good on? Are we all good on time?
I can go to another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
fair with
cool.
that.
So Lee, make your point.
Make your
So
point.
the
Didn't mean it that way.
the one benefit, which is really a big part of what was driving the source control for database that Anthony built at our previous place, was that it safeguards production from being the dev sandbox. It gives people a safe place to make changes and experiment. They're not going to break customer facing things and cause support tickets to come in because they did something they thought was going to help, but it didn't actually help. It caused more problems. And
Or they forgot a where statement.
well, they forgot a where statement.
Normally I'd
and
laugh, but that was my Friday.
It happens.
Been there.
Yeah, it happens.
Usually I do that when I'm in front of someone, so it's fine.
Well, yeah, there's always a tax when people are watching. Like, if for some reason remove some of your mental capacity, and it makes it harder to work. But yeah, it definitely happens. But if it happens on dev, it's easy to fix. And
Yeah.
with source control, another thing, like you said, it safeguards. If someone just makes an idle change and then someone else comes by and needs to refresh something or do what they need to do, those changes are gone. And that can ruin, a whole day's worth of work, for example. If you're putting in source control, whether or not you use continuous integration, put in source control, it's kept.
Mhm.
Continuous integration, which is my next topic when it's my turn again, really helps with that because then every time you commit, all your code is being merged together.
Maybe I can
But
find an example throughout this week that isn't that I can kind of redact things to make it so I can actually show it of some examples of merge conflicts and how bad they can be. I might be able to just make a couple like on my own because you can make your own branches and merge those branches together and never even deal with the main trunk and then just get rid of the trunk you're working on. I've done that plenty of times.
the one benefit of databases, you kind of have to pick a team, state based and migration based. And I should probably do a talk on that sometime. Um, if one of the benefits of migration based is when you do have a merge conflict, they're typically really simple to take care of because unlike typical software development practice, when you and your team are working on a handful of files, there's a good chance you're going to cross streams work in the same file.
Oh yeah.
There's a good chance that you guys might touch the same method because it's an important method, right?
Or change a
migrations,
method that both of us touch. Yeah, like it's
yeah. And of course, if you took a week, there's a good chance that you and your coworker
Oh, yeah.
might, and if you're working the same application, there's a good chance you're going to touch the same main.cs file or
Yep.
whatever.
Mhm.
State-based is the same way. I might make a change that affects the proc, or Lee might also make a change that affects that proc or that table, or if it's a really new development, there might be a lot of foreign keys being put up and taken down, and we're trying to work out how we're going to have this set up. We're going to cross a lot with migration based. My experience so far is it's not as much of a problem because Lee makes a change to a proc or a table or whatever. He has a script. We have a policy of we put the beginning of the file name is the date and then a number. So your first file of the day, your second file of the day, then your initials. It's kind of a blame thing, but not a negative way. So basically, we know if something's wrong with this file and O'Grady did it, we could say, yo, O'Grady. If Susie did it, we could say Susie.
Yeah.
And then a note that says what it is, right? Change proxy blah dot c. Because we do it that way, the fringe benefit that I didn't know about when I picked migration based, when I had to make a decision, is I make my file, Lee makes his file. Since he's not editing my file, I'm not editing his file, we never have merge conflict almost ever. And so lately, some things have happened that we got really busy working in the same database, source control, one of our probably our busiest database, and a lot of us are messy in there. And like when we have a merge conflict, it's just like which file goes first, and it literally doesn't matter because they're going to run in the order. So we just go put his in and put mine in first, and it's done. So that's kind of a tangent, but I will say that is one gold star for migration based. We almost never have actual bad merge conflicts.
Yeah.
One of the things
Everything
I
else is
like,
harder in databases. Go on.
yeah, one of the things I like too about source control and production deployment processes with migration scripts is I always want also to have some sort of rollback ability. Meaning, if I write alter table X, add column Y, then I'm going to write something that will undo that also.
Yeah.
So if I screw something up, I don't have to on the fly figure out how to undo the screw up.
That's hard. It shouldn't be hard.
I will
it's
say
hard.
though, a huge benefit of source control in that same regard, is like something I ran into today. Do you guys use Stash ever on your source control? So like
No,
when you
we-
go to
we
commit
keep it light.
something, and you have change, let's say you have 10 changes, or let's say 5 different files,
I've
right?
stashed once in a professional setting.
Okay, so I do it all the time.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but
Well, it's something you should start looking into more.
I have
Because
stashes everywhere. What are we talking about? What's a stash?
it's right here.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
next episode we're going to talk about Lee's stashes and the market rate.
Right. But the benefit of a stash is if you have 5 files over here that you want to check in, or you want to go through that you made changes to that you may want to check in. Let's say 3 of them are valid changes. You want to get those out there. You want to get them checked in. 2 of them aren't. Well, you stash those 2. Pretty much, you put them on the back burner. You forget about them. You do your 3 change check-ins. Then you can do whatever you want. You can pull latest. You can make sure you're on everything. All the merge conflicts or no issues. Then you can take that stash and reapply it to your code. So those 2 files are now different. You have 2 changes. You can reapply those. The benefit of that is that, like I was talking earlier, where I like to have commits, or we like to have commits that are just changing syntax or cleanup stuff. So we'll have a cleanup commit. So I might have 6 files. 2 of those were actual work. 4 of those were cleanup. Well, I stash all the cleanup stuff, check in the real work. That's one solid commit. People know what I did. They know why I did it. That's done. Those 4 files I just stashed, I check that in, then I pull those forward, commit again. Those are my cleanup commits. Second commit, everybody knows why I did that commit. It's understood what is going on. And then it's 2 commits, but it's one set of work that you had to do. So you can kind of separate them out and label them differently so that anybody looking at them, knows more of an understanding what you did or why you did it.
Yeah, sounds like Craftsman in the chat says he says I stash way too often.
Yeah.
I often look and have a dozen stashes and have no idea what any of them are for. Kind of the squirrel port approach. You stash everything and then you're like, oh.
So
I've only
that's what happened
the one time
today.
I've done it, there was like 30 files. I stashed it and I did a bunch of stuff, and then when I came back to it, I'm dealing with merge conflicts with myself at that point.
Yeah.
Like there's no one else's code involved, and I'm just like, and like to his point, I was like, I wasn't even the same person this morning, nonetheless, when I stashed these the other day, and I'm like, it was so hard. So I try not to. I guess I just don't trust myself enough with it. I don't know, but he does it all the time. So
Craftsman, have you ran into the issue I ran into today? It sounds like you may not have. When I stash something, after I reapply it, I usually delete it. So that way I don't have 30 that later on I'm like, I don't even know why I have this. But today, I went to go do a commit. Or no, I was going to do a mob start that I was telling you guys about mob. You can't have any local changes when you do a mob start because it's doing a fresh branch from this, and it's like it wants a fresh version. So you stashed all your changes. You pull the latest, and then you can reapply those changes. So what I did was I reapplied those changes. Everything worked great. I went to go commit, and I was doing a squash, which just pretty much pushes kind of what it says, pushes it all together to get it back on the main branch. And in the middle of the squash, I was like, you know what? There's a change here that I see now because it does a compare tool. I'm like, there's a change. There's a better way to do this. So we'll make that change and then I'll check that in. So there's a whole thing. But I'm like, all right. So I canceled out my squash, my commit. Didn't realize that when you do that, it brings you back to before my stash was applied. And I just deleted my stash.
Oh.
So it's all gone.
So stash is gone, code is gone. I'm like, okay. And I just pulled latest, so my local's gone. I'm like, I hate my life. So, point being, if you do use stashes, it doesn't take much memory just to hold on to them. because if I would have held on to it, it would have saved me. Luckily, it was like 20 minutes of work. It wasn't crazy, but still, it would have
Recycle
saved me
bin?
20 minutes of work. Keep that in
Recycle
mind.
is not source control either.
No, I'm saying he deleted his
I know,
stash
I
files.
was.
Just get them from the recycle bin. I don't know.
Yeah, I was playing.
I wish. I wish Git sent stuff to your recycle bin. Git's like, no, it's gone forever.
So the reason why I said earlier that the whole rollback is with the source control is hard isn't so much that rollbacks are hard, although it can be non-trivial with big changes. You have to have everyone agree that that's part of the process, or the dystopian dictator has to say that that's what's going to happen. So
Wait a minute.
wait, what?
That's fork, by the way. I just threw it in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, so my
Suspense is
point
killing me.
is that you have to have some way of rolling back. If you get to the end of your deployment or part way through it and you hit something you can't fix, that is not the moment to be asking O'Grady, how do you roll this back?
Yeah.
That's the moment you reach into the how to fix this folder and find all of O'Grady's rollback scripts or some solution that lets you go back. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And
Right?
that's the best part
I'm not
about
disputing.
fork and Git in general. I can go back to any commit that has been made and be like, that's my new source of truth. I can go pull it.
But that's not true of databases. That's the thing. Here's the big kicker. It's not true of databases necessarily, right? You could change so code doesn't have state. You start a program, it produces its own state, and then it gets going. It does the code that you or Stringer's Fool or Craftsman have produced.
Mhm.
The database existed before your code. The database was there before you started, probably, right? And it has state, it has data in there. And
The beginning was the database. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
In the beginning, it was dark.
And then
Lee came along and said, let there be sequel.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. And then some hipster devs came up and said, "Let there be no sequel," which they added sequel to. But that's a different topic.
Then Mr. T was like, I pity the fool who doesn't have T sequel.
I pity the fool who doesn't use Git. Oh my gosh. So anyway, yeah, in databases it's harder because there's state, right? So you can't just go back once it's hit prod. You have to do something, either roll back or roll forward, right? The reason why I said it was difficult. So let's see if there's a contrast between my environment and Lee's environment.
Mhm.
Lee, would you say that 90% of your peers are data professionals or more? And your employer or
We're going to use the term
90% or
professional
more?
loosely.
No.
oh
No.
so no, it's not. So okay. So the people who are committing code, some of them aren't data people who are committing SQL changes, database changes.
I mean, what do we mean by this
Okay,
is hard.
look,
I feel
Are
like you're
they-
putting me on the spot.
Are they like developers?
I kind of am,
So-
but I might have made some assumptions that aren't true. So I want to know.
There are people. I wouldn't say 90%. I would. There are a large group of people there who. It feels like data is not their first job, but they work with data.
Okay.
And then there is a segment of people whose job is data. They work with it all day, every day. But they also do things like, I think, if I understand what they're doing, they also are like software engineers like O'Grady who are building things that have nothing to do with data.
Right.
And then there are like 3 of us whose job is data.
Okay.
All day,
Okay.
every day.
So So okay, so it sounds similar to my environment. Then there's not a lot of, when I say data professionals, I mean people who like the core of the job is to understand databases and data structures and database development. That could be a DBA or a database developer or something along those lines. I feel I can't say this is true as anecdotal, but I feel like most of the people in my environment who are making code, the O'Grady's that work with me, most of them don't want to SQL. They have to SQL to get the job done, but they don't want to SQL.
Yeah.
And I feel like whenever someone like an architect or a DBA, someone who's like, I care about things, I want things to be done right, we should do. Every time you write a SQL statement, you need to write a rollback. I feel like the O'Grady's that work with me go, okay.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the not is so nice to say it's okay. Sometimes it's just not. And maybe it's a bias
It's more,
on my
no,
part.
I think it's
maybe,
more of a okay. And then we go do
which
what
is
we
why it's
want.
hard, because that became a rule in my environment more than once.
Yeah.
It did not happen though.
Yeah.
It just didn't. And then people just like, I'm not writing SQL, and then stuff's not getting done. Or they
Mhm.
write SQL and then they don't give a flying whatever. But oh yeah, I have it in the file somewhere. So that's why I say it's hard. I
Mhm.
wasn't saying you shouldn't have rollbacks. I'm saying it's again my same old answer. It's
So,
a
and I
culture
would
thing.
say, how about we swap jobs? I
Done.
screw up the data
Wait.
you're responsible for now, and then you talk to me about why you don't want to have rollbacks or an easy rollback process.
So
Is
what?
restoring a database not an easy rollback process? I don't understand.
You lost all the
No.
data since.
Not even close.
Then you've lost data, right?
Yeah.
So if your last good backup was 15 minutes ago,
Hmm.
you got, depending on company, let's say your
Yeah.
company sells things, you've got 15 minutes of worldwide orders that are just gone.
Yep.
So no. So what I do, I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer in roll forward, and it's not because I'm against rollbacks. I've just mentioned that it can be hard. I'm a big fan of roll forward, but also because I'm a big believer in source control and continuous integration and continuous deployment. I feel like when you have that in place, at least you
Dunce
have less of
knows.
a chance of needing the rollback. What?
The dunce knows.
This copy in the
I wish
backup
it
from
was
your
that
web
easy,
server.
Dunce. If we're talking about databases.
Yeah. Stop talking about me. Craftsman's like, I feel called out. So here's the thing. I want, and we can cover this in CI and CD later in the continuous integration, continuous deployment. I want the failure. If there's a problem with the code, I want to realize that as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I want to realize it in dev, where we can push a button and, depending, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, unfortunately. But in a certain amount of time, we can push a button and everything is just happy again.
Mhm.
And then we solve the problem. I don't want to wait till prod to find out that the deployment script doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
The
Agreed.
deployment scripts in our busiest database, the busiest as in work being done, as in there's multiple developers, the SQL dev, me, the mid-tier developers who write SQL to, they are all committing and making changes to that database daily. They write a script. There's scripts in there that's months old.
Mhm.
That script gets ran every I wish you had editor to bleep me out. Every bleeping day. It gets ran. So if something goes wrong, we'll know. And then dev's down. And then all the developers realize when dev's down. Right? It's their pride. Oh my gosh, what happened? Oh, Anthony's code blew up because this was okay before, now it's not okay. So I want that to happen right away. I
Yeah.
want that to happen on QA as often as possible.
Mhm.
That same database, unfortunately, I only I have the automation run on Mondays. Monday, all of the code that everyone's been put in happens on QA, and then all the QA testing that's happening, if there is QA testing happening in your environment, should be against what the developers have put out there. So if there's something wrong with it, you know.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
way, when it eventually goes up to prod, there's an extremely small chance.
Mhm.
But if you could talk your people, if you could talk your developers, O'Grady, make a rollback every time. Do
You
it.
act
I'm not
like I
saying
work
not
in
to.
SQL anymore.
I don't know what
Well,
you do,
so
man.
here's the thing, and
You do something called
I,
modding.
we probably need to move toward wrapping up, for me
Mhm.
at least.
No, it's fine.
But the
Yeah.
last point I want to make, and so we need to, it feels like we're having so many topics that can be multiple nights now. So we've made a whole bunch of assumptions, which one of them just came up just now. The assumption is you have a complete dev environment, and by complete I mean you have prod 1, prod 2, prod 3. Those are all, I'm going to call them separate streams, and you have some dev that corresponds to each of those streams. I've been at places that was not true.
Yeah.
And then
That
you,
wasn't true of the place I work at right now when I joined.
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, and so then you have to build out those devs, and then ideally dev isn't the only place you have to test something. So now you have to have something between dev and prod. And so we can talk a whole nother thing about why would you want that? How would you build it out? Blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's an assumption that I just realized we're kind of making, is we actually have an environment that's conducive to the kind of code deployment, at least from the database perspective, that we're even talking about, so
Yep.
that we
Right.
can fail early, so that the database administrator or whoever your data professionals are that are responsible for those systems can feel comfortable when we get to prod that, yeah, it's going to be fine, it's going to work, and we don't have to be worried.
Very fair.
Not
Very
everyone.
fair.
Not everyone has that. And I just saw someone. Was it you, Brady? Add to the topics CI/CD. And
That's your
yeah,
next week,
I
I
think
think, right?
yeah.
Or
The
your
next week
topic.
the next time that I'm doing a topic, I'm doing CI/CD. It's kind of, for me. It's kind of a thread.
Yeah.
We're doing talk about source control now. That way, when we talk about CI, I don't have to re-explain all of source control. And then when we talk about continuous deployment, well, we've already covered continuous integration. So
Mhm.
that's my three-piece suite. And if you want to look for a raid, I'll talk
Yep.
about a
I'm
few other
ready
points
when
real quick.
when
Oh, you're ready? Okay. And so and then I believe the plan is next Thursday and the Thursday after are both going to be his truly, Lee Markham, giving a two-parter. And I forgot the topic. I was prepared at the beginning of the stream. I looked it up, but now I don't remember. Do you remember, Lee?
How to
how
build
to
a
do
good
them.
resume. How to build a good
And it's
resume in IT.
That
all
was
right,
how to
awesome. And
do the Macarena. I think that was a different one.
no, that's
You
the
don't
other
want to see
stream.
me doing that.
What's the other stream, O'Grady? Come
Oh,
on, don't
sorry.
cross streams.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never cross the streams.
Yes. So yeah, so tune in. The next two are going to be Lee on that topic,
Mhm.
and we're still putting this stuff up on YouTube. So if you miss one, you will see it eventually. I'm getting better. I had kind of a I got a little behind, but I'm getting better. Make sure it gets up on YouTube, and I really hope to see you guys live if possible next Thursday. If not, hit us up, comment on YouTube, and we are also looking for ideas. So if you got a topic you want us to cover again, you have a topic you'd like us to talk about, or if you want to do something weird like O'Grady said, do like code mobs or games,
Yep.
tell us. Discord. All right.
Yeah, I think keep in mind one of these weekends I will also be doing some more like gaming on stream. I think that was cool. Had some people jump in, able to talk a little bit. Um, obviously, the day one wasn't as talkative, so I'd like to get some gaming with the community going on. I think that'd be cool. So keep that in mind. Shout out in Discord, yeah, and let us know what you guys want to see. Honestly, we're up for appealing to the community. So
Sounds good.
we're gonna go
Where are we
ahead
headed
and
off to?
Raid Brofish. She has a new VTubing avatar, so go check her out and give her some support. Just started the VTuber thing, so make sure you just drop that follow to her, as well as here. Drop the follow down here. I think it's like below
Link,
here.
follow, subscribe. Same thing on Ready Set Data and YouTube.
Yep, and then while this raid's going out, let's go ahead and make sure we have all the stuff one last time. Go check all that out, and then yeah, we will catch you around in the Discord. Anybody have any closing words? Everybody good?
We're good. Let's go.
Good.
All right, we'll see y'all next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.